welcome back. That throws you off every time. Sorry. Welcome back, and welcome to those who were here last month, those that are new, those that have never been. So this is the CLT Graduate Student Working Group, and we're going to start kind of our second webinar of our critical series, especially because we garnered so much support from last month's presentation, which was the critical theories that we need. We wanted to move on to, or keep the conversation going and move on to topics that are kind of near and dear to some research interests and work for some of our graduate students as well. So kind of start this off is, yes, we're looking at just doing some collaborative knowledge building, that argumentation side of things. But the biggest thing with this is I wanted to start with kind of a personal anecdote. I am the most passive giver of data around. I answer all the questions, give all my cookies away, you name it. And I've never really thought twice about it for a long time until more recently. Because I never thought it ever personally impacted me. It never impacted what I do, how I operate. I just didn't think anything of it. Well, on July 4th weekend, a ransomware attack happened at our university in the department in which I'm a GA, and it wiped out 150 computers, experiment data, and anything that we had designed or worked on in the past 2 weeks without a backup. So instantly, I started learning about the security background because I'm helping kind of refurbish computers and doing all the work in the background with them. And I learned very quickly how much impact data and surveillance of data has, but also both negative and positive sides of it. So the whole kind of inner workings of data surveillance became, thank you, Annetta, for the sponsored t-shirt there, became part of this conversation. This became much more relevant to me. So in saying that, just think very deeply about how data impacts your everyday life, both in education and work, maybe your students, yourself. And we're going to go from there into some topics, different research interests and personal interests with work. They're going to kind of do a little bit of a, like a selling point. They're going to sell themselves for breakout rooms, give you a mini topic presentation, and then we're going to break out into breakout rooms depending on what you'd like to discuss. Okay. So Annetta is going to take it from here and start us off. Excellent. With her wonderful t-shirt.
If you didn't see it, I'll catch you later. So good morning. I am Annetta Dolowitz, and Pauline, please say your last name.
Mulyana.
Yeah, I would have butchered it. Are presenting to you a little bit about digital equity and what we're kind of starting this off for us. So if I can get my computer to work, which of course doesn't work when you're in the middle of everything, and give me 1 second. There we go. She's now going to be reasonable. And Pauline and I are going to do our best to glaze this topic in less than 4 minutes. Go, Pauline.
So, hello, nama saya Aneta. So, Aneta dan Pauline today, hari ini akan diskusi sedikit tentang digital equity. And you're wondering why I'm speaking in my own native language, Bahasa Indonesia, because we will touch upon a little bit about it in our presentation. All right, Aneta, it's yours.
Excellent. So what does this mean when we say digital equality? Well, the best place to start with most things is giving you a definition, right? Digital equality means ensuring students have equal access to technology, as well as the training necessary to navigate digital tools. Sounds pretty electronic to me, Pauline. I don't know about that. But there's actually more than meets the eye when we talk about digital equality, hence my t-shirt. We're talking time zone. By a show of hands, who's actually on the East Coast right now? Who is in the East Coast time zone? All right. What you'll notice is we have about 15 or 16 presenters, or not presenters. We have 15 or 16 of us on this, and not all of us are in the East Coast time zone. Interesting. Access to tools. Boy, let me tell you, we've learned a lot about accessing tools and who can get what and what can be used globally. So I am working with folks around the world. As a matter of fact, I have 2 meetings next week. I will start at 6 o'clock in the morning where we're across the United States, England, and Australia. The following meeting, an hour later, we now turn to Singapore and we talk to our colleagues elsewhere. And we have to figure out, are we on Skype? Are we on Zoom? Are we on another? Are we going to use Teams? Are we going to use Slack? How are we going to actually communicate, and who can use these tools outside of the United States? But let's come back to the United States or wherever you're currently living and talk about physical location, proximity, and place. Do you know you have education deserts? And if you don't, congratulations, you have education deserts where you live. You may not realize that. And you might think, hey, I've heard of food deserts. Yeah, kind of a similar idea. What's available if the internet is not stable? What's available 50 miles within a location of you? But hey, I want to get out of physical station. Let's talk about context. Oh my God, I work. All of us are working. We're not under the glory of just being full-time graduate students. We have multiple things going on. We've got kids, we've got ailing parents. Our parents may live with us. Our parents may, thank God, not live with us, but that doesn't mean that we're not still caring for them. We have personal conflicts going on. Some of us have furry children and they have issues too. Now, with education deserts, what does it mean? It's pretty similar to what we would think about with a food desert. Communities are where students have few post-secondary options from which they can choose. The most common things, 0 colleges or universities are located nearby, or there's one community college that's nearby. Let me take you to Laredo, Texas, for example. Why Laredo? 60% of the population is Hispanic, and ironically, there's 4 universities there. 1 4-year, very selective university, 2 for-profits, and 1 community college. And what do you think of our 20,700 students? Where do you think most of them are enrolled? Anyone want to guess? Just call it out. Quick, I'm running out of time. Oh, come on, Kate, pop it. You know the answer.
Okay, community college.
It is correct. 60% of them are at a community college. I could continue, but I can't because it's Pauline's turn.
Thank you, Aneta. Yes, it is my turn. So, Aneta, talk a little bit about context, right? So talk about, oh my gosh, many of us are having multiple responsibilities and multiple roles. So I would like to talk more about the context, and I'm going to violate the redundancy principle. I'm sorry, Dr. Mayer. I have a quote here that Aneta got actually from a paper, and we have a link somewhere. So multiple forms of the digital divide include the divide between, so pay attention to this, developing and developed countries, women and men, rural and urban areas, young and old people, poor and rich people, and then person with or without disabilities, and then majority and minority culture persons like the indigenous or foreign people, quotation mark here, foreign people, and have or have not. And then if you remember when I introduced Aneta, right, like a few minutes ago, I spoke in my native language because it is something that we need to remember that there are some majority and also minority culture persons, people with different language. I mean, people who speak different languages, people with different native languages, and not everybody speaks English as a first language. All right, Aneta, the next one. So what does that tell us? So it does tell us that the digital divide involves more than access to device and internet connection. So it's just beyond access to tools. It's beyond access to the stable internet. Therefore, context does matter. All right, next, I would like to give a little example from my own paper. When I did this study, I got to learn something. And then from what I learned, I got some idea for my future recommendation for the research, for the future research. So in my study, the participants were non-STEM students. They're also non-traditional female students, but they were required to take quantitative courses. And then these students work like more than 60% of them work like between 10 to 40 plus hours. So there were some students who worked like more than 40 hours. And then most of them were full-time students. So they took 12 units and more. And then my study was about using data from the learning management systems. And then I would like to find an association between their access or their activity to the LMS and also with their self-regulated learning. We'll talk more about this, whether how the learning analytics that I use, how we can balance the the ethics use and things like that. We'll talk more about it further in a breakout session. And also we will have awesome topics by the next presenters.
All right, next up is me. So I'll go ahead and get started. So for my section, I'm going to talk about data justice, ethics, and data protections. My name is Chris Lukes. I'm a doctoral student at Old Dominion and also work at the Colorado Community Colleges online as an associate dean. So I deal with quite a bit of these from the policy angle, which you'll probably see from this topic piece. So first of all, what is data justice? So as Paulina and I talked about in their section about data equity, is looking at data justice is very similar to sort of in line with data equity, looking at, or should say digital equity, but it's about data. It's about fairness in the way people are made visible, represented, and treated as a result of their production of digital data. So this is especially important in today's society where we look at internet marketing, we look at how people are collecting data and how people are using, and then it's creating a picture or a snapshot, and depending on what services they get that they receive or don't receive, you also see things such as, like, you'll probably see more, I think we're a little bit more knowledgeable now with the latest campaign about the census and the importance of the census and making sure people are adequately represented at every census, so that way their communities can get the resources and various different pieces for funding as well as voting and different things like that to make sure they have an adequate count. That's all about data. And so what is data justice? It goes back into these three pillars. So really, first one focuses on visibility or invisibility. So are certain groups invisible in our current model of everything being digital and what data is collected? So how are they being visible? How is that visibility being used? So are there biases when we're looking at things like this? So you might think about policing, some of the policing and data statistics and policing when you think about visibility or invisibility. Next thing here is the ability to engage or disengage with technology. So think about if we're using technology, are there options for certain individuals to opt out? Are we using technologies that certain groups do not have access to? For instance, one of the challenges we ran into in this latest, during the pandemic, many online institutions did, is you had groups that were just assumed everyone had broadband. And so you had some courses that are heavily video, and you had students trying to do that on their phone or trying to do that on less than high-speed internet. And that causes lots of problems, especially whenever the content they're being assessed on is in video format. And so you start seeing a lot of these multimodal questions about how are you designing, how are you creating, or how do people have access or do not have access to technology, or just don't want to participate with technology. They want to be able to opt out. And the last part is talking about the anti-discrimination. So these are things like redlining. These are things like what happens. It covers a broad range. So like things like, how do you fix errors in your data? So the other thing is that with a lot of this big data, a lot of this data that's being generated, a lot of these databases are being merged together. What happens if there's a simple error? All of us are researchers here in the room. I'm sure I know no one here has ever made an error when you're sorting your data and you've never made anything like that, you've never coded improv, you never messed up your coding, you never had to go back and do different things like that. But this happens at a larger scale, and the question is a lot of these systems are closed. We do not have access to them. There is not an easy way to go ahead and ask for a way to go ahead and fix that data. The other piece you start seeing is just flows into ethics. What is the ethics of gathering all this data? How we have lots and lots of data. One of the things you start seeing, Zwitter's piece talks a little bit about it, is about how as we get more data, groups become more transparent. So it becomes their whole position, their positionality, their intent, their purchase decisions, their decision-making process becomes more apparent. The more data we collect about a certain group, we start being able to better predict their patterns. This is sort of getting that predictive analytics piece, doing things like that. We're starting to get into minority report area about, oh, well, because you have these, you tick off these conditions, then this is what you are going to be in the future. And you start getting into these type of things where you start talking about what is the ethics of having all of this data, of using all this data, and then what happens if you have a bad actor, or you have, like everyone talks about rogue agents. Well, you just have companies pursuing profits. So there's different things you're looking at here when it comes to these different pieces. All of this has resulted into stock pushes about data protection. So you start seeing about the GDPR from the European Union, the General Data Protection Rights. The state of California has passed its own data protections, consumer data protections that are out there. And that as educational institutions and institutions in general, you are now starting to see more and more of these protection policies that are starting to affect your students, customers, clients, and how you're handling your staff as well. For example, with the GDPR, you're not allowed collecting data that can be used to track an individual. So think about images, think about any sort of pictures or any sort of video or anything with their names attached to it, or things like that. How are schools handling this when you have a student from the European Union country? The other thing about it is same thing is going for California, the different things. And then of course, just because it's always fun, you got to throw in the old anonymous mask there. You also have other groups that are out there that are looking for exploits in people's poor data protection systems and going, look how easy this can be exploited, i.e. ransomware, everything else that's there, saying, look, this is what's going on. This is how badly you're protecting this important data. You're just making our job, making it easy. And some of them are doing white hat services. They're sending emails to companies saying, hey, guess what? There are these different things that are out there. This is different ways you could fix this. Sometimes companies will follow up on that. Other times they wait until something bad happens. And so that's sort of what I'll be talking about in that breakout section. And I'll turn it over to Kay.
Okay, hi everybody. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And you're gonna see this for a second because then I'm gonna do the presentation from the beginning. And somebody get a mic and tell me, are you seeing my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm gonna be talking about systems. And this is just one system. There are interlocking systems of oppression. And right now I'm just focused on the one that deals with data. And I'd ask everybody, take a look at the link that I put in there to our resources. Chris didn't mention this, but there are groups that are doing, that are working on the interlocking systems of oppression. Okay, the intersectionality when it comes to this. I'm just gonna go over some basic concepts. All of these concepts can then be taken to these interlocking systems. What I'm just going to mention, and Chris and I are going to have our breakout room is going to be a combined breakout room. So if you come to ours, it'll have these parts of it. I'd like to talk about real quickly digital rights and digital sovereignty. These are things that we don't talk about a lot in the workplace, in schools, and even when it comes to our life. Now, I totally took off Chris's Taylor's data justice model. And I went, oh, okay, that works for him. Let me use this too. Okay, our title is You Are Being Watched. and you're being watched for different reasons. This can be, you can be watched in school. Your school district may have set up for your K through 12 students a very carceral surveillance system where they're being watched as if they were criminals, and this assumption's already there. Okay, so out of the surveillance studies, and I'm basing this off a graduate political science course that I had to do a paper for. Okay, first of all, Bentham's and Foucault's panopticon. Okay, this theory of surveillance comes from, quite honestly, the late 18th century, and an architect in England who decided, how do I make the best prison ever to make inmates think that they're being watched all the time so they'll never do anything wrong, okay? Then it was taken over by the French philosopher Foucault, who started then going, look at how we are being surveilled. Look at how we are being surveilled, and look at the power system of us being surveilled as citizens, and how this is really disciplinary, and how this is enforcing norms. So this is the first level that surveillance studies looks at us being watched. The second one is Deleuze, and he came up, this is his term, individual, okay? So taking you from an individual to dividing you into parts, and you'll hear often in data justice something like the term data bodies. And what this is that, yes, you have a body, but there's all these different components of your body or your essence or your individuality are then aggregated and used. So this is a second level. Now the third level, and this level has been talked about for about the past 7 years or so, and you're hearing more of it. And it's Zuboff's surveillance capitalism. And that surveillance capitalism, this is taking it further. This is taking it further than you're being watched because don't do anything wrong, or you're being watched in school to make sure you're doing everything right, and you're being examined, and the LMS is looking at everything. Surveillance capitalism is really about, okay, so at this point in time, people are making money from watching you and aggregating your data bodies, and they're using that to make money, and they're looking at you. How can they take your information, make money off it, and then sell it back to you? And that's where surveillance capitalism is coming in. The surveillance capitalism is neo-Marxist, but you need to take a Marxist view sometimes to look at capitalism, because we're swimming in capitalism. But these are the three different levels when it comes to systems, looking at what kind of system you're in, what is your school doing, are they bringing in some things that work with the surveillance capitalism, or are they stuck in like the panopticon, where it's basically carceral. Everything that's being done, it gets done to criminal, the same thing that's getting done to criminals. So surveillance capitalism, want to quick say, profits derived from unilateral surveillance and modification, and the attempt to modify human behavior. So the capital, capital is no longer land. Okay, it's no longer mineral resources. Capital that's now being used is the information. So because of this, we, as whether willing or unwilling, unless we go off the grid, which is always an option, okay, are willing or unwilling participants, or as Rebecca said, passive when it comes to this. So digital sovereignty is the idea that in your role as an employee, as a consumer, and I put in here students and users of digital technology and services, that you have a right to your information. You have a right to how you're represented. You even have the right to be paid if they are taking your information and being used. That's the idea of digital sovereignty, that you have sovereignty over what you do on the internet, your digital image, your avatar, all of that. So this is where those concepts are being developed. Now, here's another one, and I had to dig for this term to impress my professor. Sorry, but I did. Okay, and this is the only place where I could really find the critical studies that we use in education where it intersected, and this is, and this you can really pull from Ladson Billings' critical consciousness, and also Paulo Freire's Conscienzo. Data, Datenbewusstsein, critical consciousness of how your data is being used. So do you know how your data is being used? Do you know where it's going? Do you know, are there third-party brokers who are using it? Are there app developers who Facebook is giving to app developers? So the app developers have that all information. Where is it being shared? So to kind of roll this out, big questions are, well, what are we supposed to do about that in a system where we're, consumers or pawns or workers or students? Well, Uni Global, which is a global worker federation, has come up with something. It's very basic, and it's a starting place, but 10 principles for workers' data rights. Now, and I'm not going to read this, or it's just there for you to take a look at if you want to, and you can always go to it. Oh, and I put Microsoft Worker Analytics there just because, and it's being slow, so I won't pull it. But think of, okay, it's pulling. So it's something that I had to do for my paper, which I will now. Oh, I'm seeing you're not getting it on the screen, but that's okay. What I'm trying to say is that when you were using Microsoft, when you were remote, they can track everything. They can track email hours, email sent, external network size, generated workload, calls organized, multitasking meeting hours. They can dive that deep based on their algorithm that they use. They have a diverse tie score. There's a million things that they can look at, okay? Because everything we can look at as students in an LMS, us as instructors, it can be turned on us. The eye, and that is I again, the eye can start looking back at us as instructors also. So when we're workers, everything we do can be tracked. And do we want these things tracked? Or do we have rights? So I will just be closing it up there. And basically, what we'd like to discuss, if you decide to come to our breakout, is where do we as practitioners and researchers sit in this system? Are we supporting a carceral system? Are we supporting something where our student information is aggregated, that it doesn't matter, that we give intellectual property to Turnitin.com, so Turnitin.com can have a business? Where are our student rights? Where are our rights? And where do we want to sit in a system of surveillance? Okay, so thanks. And let me get out.
All right, hang with us for one more little preview here, and then we're gonna move into breakouts after this. I'm Kristen Herman. I am a second-year doctoral student at Old Dominion University, and I wanted to take us a little bit from some of these more theoretical aspects and try to tie them into some practical application for us today. So I'm gonna speak about digital assessment, and I will start a little theoretically a little bit. It would be naive to assume that all digital assessments, just by nature of platform alone, are transformative. So I'm using some language here from Amy Bradshaw. And it would be idealistic to imagine that students use technology as creators and not just consumers, especially as we look at some of the things our students create as they cultivate Instagrams and TikToks. But billions of dollars into Apple and Netflix and Disney Plus show us that our students are also consumers as much as they are creators. The fact is that digital assessments can look very traditional or they can be transformative. So I'm pulling from Quintadora's 2006 SAMR model here, and I've put up my favorite version, which is the coffee cup version here on the screen. When technology is used as a substitution delivery platform for older models of assessment, whether it's formative or summative, think of your selection-based response items. Digital assessment then is pretty traditional. On the other end of the spectrum, if students are able to use technology and digital tools to create and curate digital portfolios, technology starts to push into a more transformative space. So both the purpose and means of critical pedagogy are transformation. And again, I'm using some language from Bradshaw there. Transformative learning allows learners to probe their own lived experiences, to make meanings, as opposed to more traditional forms of transmissive measures, which is Freire, as Kay already mentioned, in which the culture and the background of the learner can be dismissed. So it seems like I'm setting up a clear dichotomy here. Traditional assessment, in a digital assessment as an umbrella, but then traditional assessment versus transformative assessment. So wait a minute here with the dichotomy, because I'm not trying to, at least not today, to get into this idea of, traditional assessment bad, transformative assessment good. That's not a dichotomy that I want to go down the path of today. So I wanted to bring in the concept of utility value here. And there's a definition there on the screen that I pulled from Wigfield. Selection-based assessment, whether it's formative or summative, has utility value. A lot of our credentialing-based exams, our credentialing exams are based, at least in part, on selection-based assessments. Recall is such an important Bloom's level skill, low-level Bloom's level skill in high-pressure, time-sensitive fields like nursing, where clinical guidelines need to be recalled quickly and correctly if the nurse is going to be successful in treating the patient. Students, when we look at student research into utility value, students define high utility value learning experience using the following three themes, which I tried to kind of icon out there. Understanding, learning that helps students understand themselves has high utility value. More than a grade, so future goals, learning that has done something to prepare the students for professional goals has high utility value. And then transfer. Learning that's applicable to other learning, other courses, other arenas, students cite as having high utility value. So I think we can agree that there's high utility value in traditional assessment and in transformative assessment, as long as we, as designers of that assessment, are willing to critically reflect. So I want to be clear that utility value isn't on trial here today. That's not really what we're discussing here today. What is of concern is digital rights. Hey, we just saw such a great kind of presentation from Kay on this. This was so good. So I was struck by that section of our presentation, how digital rights are often sacrificed due to passive data collection. Do we have a responsibility to protect our students from further exposure? And again, I think this occurs in both traditional forms of digital assessment and in transformative forms of digital assessment. Kay just briefly touched on Turnitin, and you can see I'm kind of calling them out here on the left-hand side of the screen. Traditional forms of assessment like essay writing that can now be submitted digitally. Well, of course, there's a tool for that, right? A tool that will help us, that's such a loaded term, help us with collection and prevention of plagiarism. I am going to come back in a minute to how these data surveillance tools love to couch themselves in terms of student support, and in that way absolve themselves about agency. So hang on for one more slide if you're ready for that. Should students have to submit their writing to a database that will archive it long after they're no longer a student? Transformative assessors also not off the hook. And I only called out 4 companies here: Google, Prezi, Spark, Loom. And I tried to pick ones that were especially free tools, but I could go on, right? Coggle, Nearpod, Seesaw, Mural, Poll Everywhere, Kahoot, Class Dojo for my first grader. I mean, the number of free tools and slightly subscription-based tools that we subject students to. When we offer, we even offer students this, we say, it's your choice if you want to use it to make your portfolio. It's your choice if you want to use that for your final project. What messages or practices are we implicitly agreeing to by asking students to partner with these third-party sites for project creation? Do our students know to ask that question? Have we taught them enough to pause and ask what they're signing up for when they choose to use this tool for their projects? Data justice. Chris gave us such a great 5 minutes on data justice. Traditional. So I tried to hold back a little bit on the last slide. I didn't hold back very well about the fine line between student support and student surveillance. But Proctorio has dove headfirst over that line. So I'm taking the gloves off. I'm going to dive headfirst after Proctorio. Remember utility value. I do believe in selection-based digital assessment. I believe that has utility value. But I struggle with coupling that assessment with the digital tools that have cropped up in the name of securing a safe testing environment. I managed a Proctorio account for some time at my previous place of employment, a large public university in Pennsylvania, so I can verify firsthand, although I'm nervous to do so, giving Proctorio's penchant for legal action. Students of color self-report that Proctorio's facial recognition, oh, sorry, they like to call it facial detection. It's not facial recognition, it's facial detection. That software requires multiple attempts for students of color to access the exam, which already sets up an inequitable testing environment. Transformative assessment. I pulled this image for those of you who were at the Summer Research Symposium. I think we talked about that briefly as we were all getting together this morning. I pulled this image from Tessie Moses' website. I want to shout her out again. She did a great kind of keynote for one of the days at the Research Symposium. When we talk about some more formative forms of assessment, things like discussion board posts that's subject to LMS analytic monitoring, that's often done in the name of early intervention for students with mental health issues, that we can now pull out those troubling phrases and get students the support they need. Unfortunately, we have studies showing that when it's students who aren't of color, when our white students' language is pulled out, they're getting referred to counseling services by the algorithm. When our students of color's writing is being pulled out, they're getting referred for disciplinary action. And why is the algorithm doing that? Why is it drawing those lines? So there's more going on with that algorithm than simple support. Critically reflecting on what it might be like for identities other than your own to release work into a digital space. What's safe for you may not be safe for everyone. That's important, I think, for us to reflect on as creators of digital assessment. Finally, digital equity. So a bit of a different approach here. I haven't kind of split down between traditional and transformative. I want to talk about them all together. Both traditional and transformative forms of assessment can be subject to issues of digital equity. Paulina and Annetta talked about access, and I kind of want to talk about access and then also move beyond it. Proctoring services require an inordinate amount of bandwidth when you're running your camera and your microphone and everything to record what's going on. Video creation and editing softwares for transformative assessment require an enormous amount of bandwidth, even free versions. Hotspots require an additional cost to someone. So as we move from individual to institutional, someone's paying for all that. I also want to talk about who has a seat at the table for when we're making decisions like this. If you're not writing your own analytics software, even if you are writing your own analytic kind of codes for your LMS, are you inviting students of color to the table? Are you inviting women to the table? So you can talk about how that algorithm is going to affect them. If you're purchasing a third-party algorithm, who's buying that? Who's sitting at the purchasing table? Who gets a voice? We've seen that algorithms don't encode our bodies in similar fashions. We've heard that not everyone is invited to the table. So I think we're really looking at some ill-structured problems, citing Dorst here from 2006. In my breakout room, I want to talk about these ill-structured problems, and I want to start to think about solutions. I definitely believe in critically reflecting on true utility value of an assignment. I believe in collaborating with your audience, with your students, and I believe with sitting with your own bias as a designer. I found that one theory, localized context of each approach, really works for me as a practical solution for some of this, but I don't think it's the only one. So I want to get together. I want to talk about not silver bullets, but just different ways to approach these practically so that we can create more equitable spaces for our students. I want to leave with just two stories I'd heard. Kay talked about the carcel logistics of things. This was a great article that came out in Gender and Society just this past week. And then something a little more mainstream from the New York Times. I'm going to drop links to both of these articles in the chat so you guys have access to them as well before we break out.
We'll just wrap up here.
Yeah.
I don't think it was enough time for us to actually, I mean, I think we need more time.
Which is perfect.
Yes, because
Not between Kristen's like passion blowing out of the water and you and Chris dynamic duo blowing out of the water, and then Pauline and I.
No,
you guys were great too. I kept them company because they had some people that had to leave early, so I went and kept them company there. No, to wrap it up, this is great because we want to keep the conversation going on this because there is so much to discuss with respect to data and how it's being used. So ironically enough, we want to get into more of the debate side of things, and you've noticed that a lot of our presenters stayed away from. Well, sorry, Kay, you're not including this. And maybe Kristen, they were trying to not say that they had a particular view, but you could probably tell that they do have a particular view. And one of the conversations that came up a lot was we all have different viewpoints on data and how to use it, how it's being used, both negative and positive. So like, and it's not even that dichotomy. It's very, there's a spectrum of viewpoints on these different topics. So what we want to do is in our next engagements or our next webinar, which you'll see announced eventually, is we're going to take this more to a overall debate. But not argument in the sense of war. That's the perception a lot of people have. That's the metaphor behind it. This is argument in terms of collaborative knowledge building. So what we want to do is see the viewpoints and perspectives everyone has and see if we can come to some sort of consensus or strike a balance on how data is going to be used or should be used in I guess, work in education specifically as we go forward. And I think it'd be very interesting with I find that the distributed knowledge across a vast amount of people will allow us to look at a lot of different perspectives and come up with something that kind of is a bit more diverse and meets more needs than just, the 5 people making decisions about policy, which Chris works with all the time. I'm just kidding. But I think it'd be a very interesting perspective to put on data because there is so much to talk about. So we're going to kind of, I hate saying hash it out because I don't mean argue in that sense, but we're going to get a little bit more, I guess, personal about it in terms of viewpoints. So you'll see advertisements for that coming up. That will be our next session. And please feel free to come back and engage with us, bring new people. We want new viewpoints as well. And thank you very much for coming today. Make sure that you get can you pop the resource page back in just in case?
Sure.
It's really far up there. We have tons of resources. You find more resources, you're more than welcome to share them with us. If you're a grad student, you want to get involved with us, we are always welcome to growing bigger. more perspectives, more interests. So please reach out to us. All right. And everyone have a great rest of the week. Happy Monday.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. Take care.